welcome to, there we go. Hi, Stephen. Welcome to the Built Environment Well Pod space. Very glad to have you here to hear about a report that you're going to be sharing that's been recently produced and circulating around the UCLA community.
Thank you for your invitation.
Yeah. But before we get started, let's talk a little bit about who BEWell is for those of you who are going to be listening to this interview and don't know BEWell. But BEWell stands for Built Environment Well, and it's a pod, one of many pods that exist within the Seminole Healthy Campus Initiative. And each one of those pods has a particular focus. BEWell's focus is on improving the built environment at UCLA so that the campus community can be healthier, happier, and generally improve well-being. So we tend to focus on a lot of projects on campus that are going to shape the built environment, the physical spaces in which we inhabit, so that it's just a better space for all of us. And so when Stephen approached me with the report, it felt very much that it coincided with BEWell's mission. So we're excited to hear about the report and talk a little bit about it. So let me introduce you real quickly. Stephen is the co-founder of the Bruin Coalition on Recreation Expansion, or BCORE for short, but he is also a JWC Board of Governors undergraduate representative, as well as a FitWell trainer. And so he joins us today to talk about this recent report that he co-authored about the importance and need for additional strength and conditioning space at all of UCLA's recreation centers. So Stephen, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
I'm excited to be here.
To get us started, why don't you tell us a little bit about who is the Bruin Coalition on Recreation Expansion and what's the mission and the work that you do?
So we are an advocacy organization with about 200 members right now. The work that we've done is for the past year or so, we've been working alongside Erin McMahon, the Director of Recreation, Mick DeLuca, the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, I believe, alongside a lot of other administrators in recreation to basically bridge the gap between student voices and policy discussion surrounding the upcoming seismic renovations for the JWC. Some of those renovations include improvements that potentially convert less used spaces into more usable spaces. And kind of our organization was built around trying to make the best case to push those through, to gain funding, to make sure that those improvements actually do happen. Some of the improvements being expansion of strength spaces and updates to locker rooms and restrooms. And so the first 9 months or so of our organization was dedicated to collecting student voices of users and non-users of the JWC, and basically seeing what was the general sentiments around equipment, space, the availability or lack thereof of various different resources, such as strength space, studio and court spaces, meeting room spaces, multi-purpose spaces. And so we kind of wanted to collect student voices to voice whatever case students brought up, basically. So I view myself kind of as a speakerphone, if you will, for what students want.
That sounds great. And you all have now produced a report called Strength, Space, and Health Equity. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and perhaps what were some of the findings and primary recommendations that came out of that report?
Yeah, would you mind if I share my screen?
Go for it.
So the report itself is approximately 40 pages, so I'm going to go through a presentation instead. But we already covered this. The BCORE report basically details a variety of things, both the key findings and statistics that we got from our own surveys of students directly, as well as a scientific literature review of other UC campuses, review of scan-in data across the past decade or so at the JWC, as well as UCLA Recreation's other strength offering facilities. So that would be BFit and KREC, alongside mental health reports and athletics cross comparisons. So some of our key findings that our own surveys provided were that students enthusiastically support strengths-based expansion, but for the most part, there's a disconnect between wanting it and knowing how to get it. Over 75% of our respondents asked for more equipment, space, or strength capacity, and average wait times for machines overall were about 15 minutes or so. 9 in 10 students have modified their workout to avoid a machine due to wait times, which I think is worth reiterating because a periodized strength program, or a program where you progressively increase in weight to get stronger, becomes much harder to achieve when you have to change your equipment. You can't use the same load, just adding an additional rep. You have to kind of reevaluate what you can do on each machine, which makes it more difficult to effectively use strength equipment. Some industry and population trends. There's been a massive increase in strength usage since the JWC was first built in around 1980. Some studies found that young adults, so the bulk of the UCLA undergrad population, has seen a threefold increase in the percentage of people meeting AHA strength requirements, and women in that time have seen a fivefold increase. And so UCLA being a female majority campus, this is an even larger increase than the general population that we would otherwise see. To further add to that, population trends at UCLA, we've grown since the JWC was built by about 15,000 students, and we're hoping to expand by an additional 3,000 to 4,000 students by 2025. And so we're seeing not only more people use strength spaces, but we're also seeing more people, period, using the same strength spaces at UCLA. And so it's a dual edged kind of increase in utilization here. Some comparisons. The JWC offers 1 squat rack per 6,000 students. Of course, we have other equipment, but squat racks are a useful metric because they, 1, are very versatile. You can do an entire workout on them, and 2, every gym basically has them, and so you can use it as a representative marker of how much strength capacity a gym has. All of UCLA Recreation has double that number of squat racks as the JWC does, so 1 squat rack per 3,000 students. UCLA Athletics offers 1 squat rack per 30 students, and so 1% of the amount relative to athletics. The JWC also provides anywhere between half to a fourth of the strength capacity of other UCs that have had recent updates to their primary recreation center. And so we're seeing other UCs follow this trend of, we're seeing an increase in strength space, we should probably increase our strength space, or increase strength space utilization, we should increase our strength space accordingly. And so for reference, the JWC offers just over 100 strength machines and just under 10,000 square feet of strength space. UC Riverside offers twice the amount of space with half the students. UC Davis offers twice the number of strength machines with the same number of students, approximately. I'm rounding here. And so, sorry, you can see that we have kind of fallen behind the times, at least in terms of offering strength capacity relative to our UC peers, and then especially relative to UCLA Athletics, which, as we know, is a pretty dominant program nationwide. Recreation and mental health. Both the scientific literature as well as our own analyses of UC undergraduate experience survey data paired with scan-in data found that campus recreation usage decreases mental health issues. It also uses fewer resources, is preferred, or uses fewer resources than dedicated therapy, is often preferred over dedicated therapy, and can serve more people. And so it's not to say that we need to necessarily remove therapy, but we should increase recreation capacity alongside our tier 1 clinical services in order to be able to basically bolster our preventative measures. How am I doing on time?
You're good. I think a couple more minutes, and then we can
Cool.
wrap up.
We also saw that students who visit a certain number of times, 42 in fact, had significantly lower rates of reporting depression and stress as an obstacle to academic progress. The problem being that a majority of students, a vast majority, are not using recreation centers enough to see this statistically significant benefit. If you'll look at the bottom left, a lot of the population curves of people visiting the JWC, BFIT, KREC looks like this, very right skewed, with few people actually meeting this 42 or above number. And as we'll go into the future, this is exacerbated in certain populations. And so strength disparities of males and females. A couple of notable things is that BFIT's introduction reduced the gender gap across all measures. We tried it for means, medians, total scans. For all measures, you can see this kind of jump here, this jump here, and this jump here. This was when BFIT was opened. And so we see that BFIT basically creates more opportunity for females to enter strength spaces because BFIT is primarily a strength and cardio facility. And that effect continues for a couple of years until BFIT actually caps in its population capacity, right? You can't have multiple people using the same machine. And so after a certain point, everything's just saturated. This last thing here that I want to make a note of is this is 2019 to 2021. This jump down to points that we hadn't seen before is due to the pandemic. And so another takeaway is that when you levy restrictions on equipment, because this was during the time when recreation was open, but there were a lot of restrictions. You had to have masks, weekly testing, et cetera, et cetera. The first people to go basically are women, which raises the question, what happens when it's not masks that are restricting space, but it being crowded, there not being enough capacity for everybody here, right? That's another barrier to entry that we have to consider. And the takeaway here is that we can also directly address equity in strength space utilization by increasing strength spaces. LGBTQ students also saw far lower rates of utilization. The step down from male undergraduates to female undergraduates in utilization, that size of the step was the same size as female to transgender and gender nonconforming students. And so they're 2 steps below the utilization rate of undergraduate males. Part of this has to do with the fact that we don't have currently up-to-date all-gender restrooms and all-gender locker rooms. We offer 1 all-gender restroom and no all-gender lockers for the JWC, at least. BFIT being constructed more recently has 2 all-gender restrooms, I believe, and it has all-gender lockers. Um, but the JWC itself has fallen behind its UC peers, namely Riverside, Davis, and also UC Berkeley, all have pretty modern, top-of-the-line all-gender restrooms and all-gender locker rooms offerings. UC Berkeley actually leading the way on that. They have a very, very really outstanding all-gender restroom and all-gender locker system in their primary recreation center. There's disparities among commuters and graduate students. For commuters, the transit time reduces the likelihood of using on-campus recreation facilities, and it is a linear relationship between distance from campus and utilization of the JWC, a negative linear relationship. A note that I want to especially emphasize is that over half of UCLA grad students never scanned into a facility that offers strength and conditioning in 2018 to 2019. You can see that here with graduate females. Overall, that red bar to the left is the number of, or the percentage of females who never scanned once during that school year, and that's about 60%. Mind you, 2018 to 2019 was the high point in utilization. So it stands to reason that other years had an even lower number of grad students using. And then we have a couple of recommendations. Some of these recommendations are now out of date. We've recently met with the Vice Chancellor, and a couple of the recommendations that we made have either been enacted in some capacity or are infeasible for various budgetary reasons. But our kind of takeaway is that JWC seismic happening between 2024 to 2026-ish, the timeline is rough, presents an opportunity to expand strength spaces as well as improve gendered locker rooms and restrooms without further impacting students. Parts of the JWC will close due to those renovations. So if we can get improvements alongside it, then we don't impact students more than we would otherwise, which is why BCRE has been pushing for this. Seismic also allows us to have mitigations during the actual construction period. And those mitigations can either be temporary, think putting up a large tent and just kind of moving things and then moving things back, or they can be more permanent measures. That's actually how we got the current locker room in the JWC. Was about 20 years ago. Lockers had to be shifted from other gyms on campus to the JWC as part of a mitigation, and it became a permanent measure. And so that's definitely possible here. A couple of suggestions were to basically put in storage lockers with squat racks. Those are called shred sheds in Drake Stadium. And that would basically permanently expand strength capacity, as well as being between the JWC and BFIT, it'd be able to offload strength utilization needs from both of those facilities. A couple of other recommendations is in the planning process, ensuring that satellite facilities like BFIT and KREC are constructed alongside housing developments, that they're not just a tack on or a temporary measure, that we do need as essential as running water. We need the ability to work out, to maintain our health, to support our physical and mental well-being where we're living, right? And so KREC does that pretty well. BFIT for the Hill does that pretty well. Gailey Heights recently also has its own within building gym, but we want to make sure that that continues to happen as UCLA expands, increases its student population, and expands to other satellite campuses as well. The $500,000 recommendation for feasibility and cost estimate studies is now outdated. But we want to emphasize that a long-term development plan should be conducted to try and see how we can make a third floor expansion of the JWC possible, because that really is the best way, as far as I can see, to create a sizable increase in strength space, as well as just recreation space in general. The JWC is a pivotal building in central campus to connect students, to provide for a variety of student populations, dance groups, commuter students, undergrads, anybody who's into strength and conditioning. And so really, it is the first thing that I think we should work on to really try and get an expansion proportional to the expansion of students that we've seen here. And that's about it. If you care to scan and endorse this report, it's at the bottom right of your screen, and I'll hold that there for a couple of seconds. And if you want to read the full report itself, it's at the bottom right of your screen now.
Great, Stephen, this is really great. And thank you for spending some time with me today, talking about a very tangible way in which students can get involved to change the built environment and improve their health as a result. So I think that's really important, especially from an advocacy perspective, the fact that students are getting involved in really shaping the campus in which they're going to be at for at least 4 years. So I think to just close it out, could you let us know if students are interested or campus community is interested in getting more involved? How can they get a hold of you and the B Corps group?
Yeah, so the best way to get a hold of me is to join the GroupMe. It's the center QR code right now. Let me share my screen again, sorry. The center QR code is our GroupMe. The best way is to join and then send me a private message, or join and just send any recommendation, request, etc. In that GroupMe. I try to be as active as possible there. And certainly smaller things, equipment requests, broken equipment, etc. in any of the facilities. I have relationships with all of the facility managers. And so you tell me, hey, we're missing some 5-pound plates, or hey, we'd love a preacher curl machine. I can put those recommendations in as well, directly to the best administrator to kind of make those recommendations happen if possible.
That's excellent. Well, I want to thank you again for joining us today, and hopefully the recommendations for your report go forward, and there's going to be, I'm sure, a lot of support for it. And I know that the BEWell pod is going to be very interested in hearing about this work. So thank you again for joining us, and yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.